Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today is a writer, adult literacy teacher, traveler, and student of Buddhism. She's a graduate of the MFA Writing program at Sarah Lawrence College, and her work has appeared in literary anthologies and many publications, including Tricycle, the Buddhist Review, Literary Mama, and Redivider. Hope for the Worst is her first novel, a book about being in love, despair, magic, and the redemption of female friendship. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Kate Brandt.
Thank you, Julia. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here and to talk about my book. As I'm sure you know, it's a little difficult to get attention in this sea of publications. So thank you for the opportunity.
Kate, as you well know, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
Yes, I anticipated that question. It's such a good question because it really invites me to tell the story of my journey. So the short answer to the question is that I'm a late bloomer. The long answer, which I will expand on, the long answer is that it took me a long time to find my material, and then it took me a very long time to shape my material. So I first started writing when I was 26, when I was traveling, and I was standing on a train platform in Zimbabwe, and the train was very late, and I was watching a woman pace up and down, and she was wearing high heels, and the leather on her heels was peeling up. So this detail caught my attention, and I sort of fell into a trance state. And that is what I really love about writing, is falling into that trance state. Time slows down, and you kind of leave your busy mind behind. So I continued to write, and I applied to the MFA program at Sarah Lawrence when I was about 32. So that already puts me in the late bloomer category. And then I kept writing, and the most important thing that came out of my time at Sarah Lawrence, aside from some really wonderful guidance by some gifted writers who were teachers, was my writers group. So I have a really wonderful writers group. There are 8 women, and many of them also went to Sarah Lawrence. And this book took 10 years to write. And I kept going back to the drawing board. Even when I had the material, I kept trying to find the best way to tell the story. And so I would write an entire version, and I would bring it to my writing group, and they would say, I don't think it's working. Here's some suggestions. And I would go back to the drawing board, and I would try it another way. And I'm very grateful to them because I think if it were someone else in my position, I might have just said it's good just to put them out of their misery. But they did not do that. They, I think, believed in me more than I believed in myself, that I could eventually get to the place where the story was really working. And so that's why it took so long. There were many, 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 many revisions.
I think having writing groups is just so vital for all of us, and our writing community is such a generous one, and we share with each other and what worked for us or what didn't work, and so I think that's just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have been together for about 20 years. And, it's a really special kind of friendship because you know a person's story, when you're in writing group with them. You know their origins, you know what's important to them. So we are very, very close. And I've been incredibly grateful for that in my life.
That's wonderful. It's a real sisterhood.
Yes. This book is about a young woman in her 20s in 1980s New York City. And she falls in love with her Buddhist teacher who has seduced her. And then he rejects her. And the story is really about how she comes back from that. It happens to be absolutely shattering for her, and she really falls apart. So this story it's about Buddhism. It's about pain. What do we do with pain? How do we heal ourselves? And it's really asking questions about kind of what's important in life, what matters. So it's also, I would describe it as a Me Too book in a Buddhist context. So it's really a good book for anyone who is interested in reading about that kind of journey, a journey from pain to self-redemption.
Kate, I've spoken with several Western women who practice Buddhism. What do you think is the major draw?
Well, I'll talk about it a little bit in the context of the book. So this is a young woman who's graduated from college, where she was kind of exposed to all these very idealistic philosophical ideas. And then she comes out into the real world, and the question is, how fast can you type? This was in the 1980s. And so it's quite disillusioning. And Buddhism has a lot of answers to questions like that. Buddhism is, it really has been a belief system for me that has worked for me. One of the central ideas in Buddhism is, of course, just live in the moment, appreciate the moment, which is actually, I think, so hard for us to do in our society, where always we have goals and to-do lists. And another one is about emptiness, which sounds like something you might not like, but it's a kind of paradoxical empty fullness, I would call it. I think in the Zen tradition, they talk about the bowl is only useful when it's empty. So it's a way of looking at the world that really fosters self-acceptance and just being in the moment, being in life and appreciating life. And have I achieved that? Not at all. I'm still working on it. But it does give me a lot of comfort because I found the world without any spiritual dimension, I found the world hard to live in.
I agree. And I think we should all be working toward those ends, to live in the moment and to be a empty vessel so that we can fill ourselves with the most satisfying and productive things possible. You know, I call this writing in life's sweetest third. And I think it takes us sometimes to get to a certain age to be able to appreciate life and our experiences and try to understand those.
Yes. Certainly at this time of life, you start thinking about those kinds of things. For me, I began thinking about them in my 20s, and that was partly because I was very depressed. And that is how writing has also helped me. It's allowed me to go into this place, as I said, kind of like a trance state. It is very much akin to the kind of emptiness, the Buddhist emptiness. And so I've always relied on it to cope. It's been one of my coping mechanisms. So yeah, I'm lucky to have it, I think.
A lot of us use writing as our own personal therapy, you know, getting those words down on paper. We can try to make sense of our life and our world.
Yes, absolutely. We can craft it into a story, and we can sort of try to master it that way. And certainly I was doing that with this story. It's very autobiographical, but it's a novel because I had to add in things and, you know, take things away.
That's what I did with my own story. My books have threads of memoir running through them, but I couched them in fiction so I could make it turn out any way that I wanted it to.
Well, yes, and you can shape it. The thing that I really struggled with the most with this story was the shape. And what I ended up with was, in the end, after a revision in which it was all letters and it was two archaeologists, and one of them was in Tibet and one of them was in New York, to a woman who was involved in resisting the Chinese police in Tibet, to finally just bringing it down to what I felt its strengths were, which was just the experience of the main character. And so it's told in alternating notebook entries. There's a red notebook, there's a blue notebook. The red notebook is the story of the past and her affair with her teacher, and the blue notebook is the story of her present. And then eventually they converge. So it took me a very long time to find that shape.
Well, once you discovered the shape and it was honed and strengthened by your writing group, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to choose a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
So that's an interesting question. That's another area where I was very lucky to have a writing group, because many of the women in my group, all the women in my group, have been published in different ways. And so I started to look for an agent. I queried about 20 agents. This was during the pandemic, so I was living alone and not seeing anybody. And it was starting to really make me very depressed. It's really a rat race to try to find an agent. So a friend of mine from writing group had sent her book to small presses. So I sent my book out to small presses. So this book was published by Vine Leaves Press, and they've been really wonderful to work with. And I had a wonderful developmental editor who really understood what I was trying to do and gave me great suggestions. So that was a very good experience. You know, when someone understands what you're trying to accomplish, that's so validating. So it was a good experience. I had to wait a while for the book to come out, but that was okay with me.
Well, since we're talking about the book now, why don't you tell us a little bit about the passage you brought to share today and then read from it so that we can hear your tone and voice in the book?
Okay, so I'm just going to read from the beginning because I think it really gives a feel. So this is right in the beginning, and Ellie is the main character. She's the one telling the story. And she's writing in her notebooks. She lives in New York City in the 1980s. She lives on the Upper West Side. And Calvin is her Buddhist teacher. 5:30 a.m., the view down Amsterdam Avenue. A few short trees, spots of green over the gray road lined with cars on either side. A blue sedan, a dilapidated station wagon, a white van. The church with its triangular roof, a rectangular tower beside it. Barely visible in this light. Maybe I'm just seeing what I know is there. In the Iliad and the Odyssey, the day always starts with the rosy-fingered dawn. But in the city, dawn is not rosy-fingered. It is gray, and then the white summer light is everywhere. Everything is painfully present, a picture that has been taken with a too bright flash. I'm dressed for work, short sleeve blouse, linen pants, saddle shoes. The office doesn't open for 4 hours, but I woke at 5 after falling asleep at 2. That's how it is now, 3 hours at a time, after I take a Benadryl and down a few shots of tequila. My legs ache, my eyes are crusted, my head is an anvil. When I wake now, there is maybe a nanosecond of me being who I used to be. Then I think of Calvin and become who I am now, a harpy swooping down to take bites out of myself. Last night in the neighborhood, some sort of fight happened around about midnight. There were shouts, a loud bang, then lots of voices jumping into the middle of it all. It must have been the block up the street because I couldn't see much, even when I went to the bedroom window at the north end of the apartment. It died down fast enough. A fire that caught, flared briefly, moved on. So then there's a short break. According to Calvin, most of us live in a state of delusion. That was the theme of his first lectures. We're all brainwashed. We all think it's about getting ahead, or conversely, about not getting ahead, not playing the game. It's neither, folks, he said. It's just about being completely present in the moment that we are. People think Buddhism is about getting away from it all, he said. Buddhism is about being awake. Wake up, people, he yelled at us. Wake up to your life. That was a year ago. I remember how exhilarated I was, how uplifted. Calvin had shown me the possibility of being more than I was. Now I am less than I was. I stand in my apartment for hours, and my mind is a high-speed movie that can't stop cranking out the same scenes. I have undressed in front of Calvin, and he aches for me, reaches out an arm. I have asked a question that has revealed a contradiction in what he says. In Buddhism itself, I've made him realize that I am not only young and beautiful, but also wise. I have written something so poetic and tragic that he is moved to tears. That is how hours go by. It feels like minutes, but when I look at the clock, most of the night has slipped by. It's almost the next day. Last night, when I realized I'd been sitting on the couch for 3 hours without moving, I made myself get up, go into the bathroom, look at my own face in the wood frame mirror that balances between a small ledge and a pipe. I took myself in, the frame of long brown hair, high forehead, slightly ski jump nose, lazy S-curve of the cheekbones. He's not going to call you, I said out loud. You don't mean that much to him. Which is impossible. When I first met Calvin and heard him lecture in that loft on 14th Street, I knew. I sat in the back, didn't speak, didn't even make eye contact with anyone, but I knew he'd plumb mystery. Someone who could turn the world upside down and shake it so the truth came tumbling out at your feet. I've known that ever since. It's the one thing I've been sure of. So when I looked in the mirror last night, it didn't seem possible that he just lied to me. Not after all this.
Oh, that's so poignant.
Thank you.
Was there anything in all of your versions that you totally edited out of the book that didn't make the cut?
So many things that I totally edited out. I had whole frames. I had two archaeologists who were writing back and forth to each other. Originally, the entire story was set in Tibet, and it took many versions until she goes to Tibet at the end, but most of it is set in New York City. So this book is very much about what happens in a person's mind. You know, it's not so much about plot.
Well, those are important books, those quiet books, introspection is sometimes just so significant to us.
Yeah, that's why I read. You know, I read to find out about people's inner lives, the things that you might not see on the outside, or they might not tell you. So that's what's interesting to me.
I know you shared your writing group and how that's improved your writing journey, but what about challenges? What about publicity? We don't like to promote ourselves. So have you found anything that's worked for you?
No, quite the opposite. I have found it to be extremely difficult, you can put a lot of work into it and not really get a lot of return. A friend of mine who published with a small press hired a publicist, but it's very expensive. You have to be willing to invest that kind of money, and I just really can't do that. So I don't have any tips to share. I'm sorry. It's just really hard.
Well, it is frustrating, and that's where most of our authors find a hang up. It's just very difficult to know what you can do that will provide any return. And I think it's just a long, slow journey of doing what we can on social media and what we can trying to get publicity out there, marketing out there. And after 7 or 8 times of hearing our name, maybe somebody will pick up the book. And,
Right.
I've talked to so many authors who think that they only have 6 months to promote their book or it's over. And I'll say, no, we have years, we have
Yeah,
centuries to promote these books because I'm finding books that were written years and years ago that I'm reading now.
absolutely. That's such a good point. And around the launch, which was in March, I really got exhausted and I just had to take a break for a while because I have a full-time job. And I don't self-promotion, I was not raised with self-promotion. And I also was not raised with social media. So it's been very difficult for me. Yeah.
Do you have another book in you?
That's a very good question. I've actually found it difficult to get going again after publishing the book. I think it's because it was so much work to write this book that, I'm kind of looking for ways to make it easier, but I don't think it can be, for me, easy. So I'm really trying to be very gentle with myself and just write and not try to think about anything that I'm doing as a long-term project. Just see what comes out.
I think one thing that it can do is make the process move more quickly. I think that with my second book, I had learned to get it on paper and not worry so much about editing every single sentence. So everything moved more quickly with the second book, at least.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if I do write another long work, I'm hoping that I've learned some things from working on this one. I am unfortunately the kind of person who has to do it all the wrong ways until I find the right way. That's just how I do it. So
most of us. What does writing success look like to you personally?
that's such a good question. I have always felt that writing success is when other people tell me that really moved me, that really spoke to me. I've had that experience. That is absolutely, I mean, I think writers write because they're lonely. My first writing teacher said people write because they weren't invited to the party. So being able to, to know that you were able to convey your experience to somebody else, and that I'm surprised how many people have said to me, oh yeah, I went through that too. So that's very rewarding. And I would like to have some more readers, that's where the promotion comes in, and that's been a little bit disappointing, but I really need to focus on the people who have read it and have spoken to me about how it spoke to them.
That's been my favorite part of this journey. Is my first book was about adoption. I'm an adopted child from a maternity home, and I've had people reach out to me from all over the country, not family, not friends, just strangers who picked up the book and it resonated with them, and they let me know about their story. That's been, so touching to me to hear from others how this book was important to them.
Yes, there's a lot more awareness of adoption issues now, I think. So I think that's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful gift to give people, because it's, a lot of people suffer, not everybody, but a lot of people suffer from it.
And your topic as well, the Me Too movement, has finally been recognized as something that's actually happening every day.
Yes. And also I was writing about depression, and I wanted to write about that because I think when people see you from the outside and you're depressed, you can seem very frustrating person. Why can't they just pull themselves together? So I wanted to write something that would kind of show what that experience is like from the inside.
And that's most important. It runs in my family as well, and it is a very misunderstood disease.
Yeah.
Okay. As always, our last interview question is, our writers over 50 are unique. Do you have any advice for writers 50 and above?
One of the women you interviewed before me, Alison from Portugal, she wrote about, I thought she said something really good in answer to this question. She said, people say write what you know, but really her advice was write what you feel. And I think that is a really good piece of advice. Every story has to have a beating heart. And, that's why I write. That's why I read. I want to feel what you feel. I want others to feel what I felt. So I think that is a wonderful piece of advice. And what you said earlier, just write. Don't try not to let that inner critic come. Maybe later when you revise, that's when you can let that inner critic come to the table. But when you're writing, just, write what's in your mind and get it down on the page. And I think writing is special to everybody. I teach adult literacy, and my students will tell me, yeah, I write poems and then I throw them under the bed, right? I think it's really a need that people have to communicate their own stories. So I just think it's a healthy thing to do.
It truly is. And a lot of us use writing as therapy, and it does help us to understand our world and our feelings, and try to figure out this crazy life we've been gifted. And I just appreciate your being with us today and writing about such significant topics. And we're excited to now count you among our authors over 50.
Thank you, Julia. I'm excited to be one. So thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.